discuss in efforts to restore stability and good governance at the Universal Service and Access Agency of South Africa. Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Solly Malatsi, has removed 2 of its board members after they failed to obtain approval and to provide evidence of permission from their employers to conduct additional remunerative work outside their official roles as required by law. Minister Malatsi joins us now. A very good evening to you, Minister. Thank you so much for your time. You've taken what you've referred to as a proactive stance to show that under your watch, abuse of public funds for the benefit of individuals who fail to uphold the laws of South Africa will not be tolerated. How did you get to the decision to fire the 2 board members?
Thank you, and good evening to all the viewers. So basically what happened is that as part of the handover process for the 7th administration, it was brought to my attention that my predecessor had made efforts to establish from these 2 board members that they did not obtain the permission that they need to have sought in order to serve as board members since they are civil servants, and the law is very clear in that regard. If you are a civil servant who wants to earn extra money outside of your official roles by doing remunerative work, the employer must give you permission. So he had initially written to them, but because of the time lapse between the administration, he had not as yet received the responses because they were prevaricating. So one of the first things that I did upon coming across this was to write to the individuals to say that this matter has come to my attention. May you kindly produce the permission that your employers granted you in order to do this role. We exchanged numerous letters, and throughout those exchanges, the proof of the documentation that shows that both their employers granted them permission was missing and continues to miss to this date. What then happened was, in order to satisfy ourselves that we are being thorough and being fair, we then wrote to their employers. Ms. Ranto is an employee of a municipality in the Eastern Cape. Ms. Babusela is an employee of one of the government departments in the provincial government of Gauteng. And in the case of Ms. Ranto, the employer said that we never provided the permission. In fact, we denied that permission when the application was made. In the case of Ms. Mabusela, the department, and I must commend the Gauteng provincial government in that when we asked them the questions, they were responsive and they were open, and they were equally proactive to say that we have given the individual a set number of days to respond. The individual failed to respond within those number of days. They then did a secondary letter, to my understanding, and on the basis that the employers themselves in their communication to us indicated that on the one hand there was no evidence, on the one hand the individual wasn't forthcoming, we thought it was the most informed, reasonable and rational decision to take to remove them from the board, because the Auditor General had flagged that the monies that have been paid to these individuals in board fees and other, earnings that they have earned as a result of being board members is now flagged as irregular expenditure. So we have directed the Director General.
And the monies, if you'll pardon me, Minister, 1.6 million in board fees between the 2 individuals. How will the monies be recovered, and will law enforcement officials be stepping in? What is the approach you're taking here? And also just a sense of justification as to why the individuals didn't go and ensure that there is permission. I know for the one, permission was denied. What happened to the other?
Well, the other cannot produce evidence that she had the permission of the employer. The employer, her employer wrote to us to say, we asked her to say, when did you apply to us to give you permission to do this role? And the individual is in 60s and 70s, So with regards to your primary question about the process, we have mandated the Director General as the accounting authority to initiate processes to recoup the money. The money must be recouped. They shouldn't have earned that money. They were not legally entitled to earn that money. And it is our intention that we're going to use every avenue of the law to recover that money.
You've also, just looking at another matter, Minister, you've also instructed the Postbank Board to ensure that the recommendations contained in the KPMG report are implemented. You're pretty determined to ensure prosecutions in this case.
The key thing is that where wrongdoing has occurred, there must be consequences. And that is not just wishful thinking. It is because the law dictates that where there's wrongdoing, there must be consequences. The KPMG report, the heartbreaking thing about that report is that it identified incidents, a series of incidents that led to, over 89 million being swindled away from the post fund. And those monies belonged to poor South Africans who, one, invested their monies through the Post Bank, or they were beneficiaries of social grants, and they got robbed by greedy individuals who are not law-abiding citizens. So we have written to the Hawks to request that this matter be expedited because there are criminal elements to it. Ultimately, it is about ensuring that in the entities of government, good governance is a priority. We are all appointed in our roles to uphold the law. And where there is deviation from that, there must be consequences. The law is as straightforward as that. And we are determined to make sure that no individual, no greedy individual, abuses their positions of power through criminal activities.
Have you set a timeline for that?
A timeline for what? Info?
Have you set a timeline to see when these individuals will be brought to book? I mean, do you have some sort of idea of how you'd like this process to pan out?
So basically, with the conclusion of the KPMG report, is now a law enforcement matter, right? But the criminal elements are a law enforcement matter. The things that are within the ambit of the department and the leadership of the post office is the implementation of, the recommendations around the operational matters and how we improve, the systems in that regard, and make sure that we protect the post office from being vulnerable to criminal syndicates and naughty people whose intention is to rob poor South Africans. So we trust in the process and in the other organs of state and state institutions such as the Hawks to help us fight this criminality. And
when talking about, a matter perhaps closer to home, switching gears slightly, the SABC expects to report a 590 million rand loss for the current financial year, representing an improvement of over 1 billion rand loss it reported last year. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think that speaks to some of the very steady, small progress that is being made under the current board and the current leadership. And I think it's positive early signs. A loss is still not, something to celebrate, no matter how reduced it is. But I think it is important that the SABC, as part of its turnaround strategy, continues to show that it can be competitive in a highly competitive broadcasting space, that the SABC is led very well, that it has the right type of leadership, and it is encouraging that even in terms of attracting talent, the SABC is currently filling senior management executive roles that will be instrumental in its repositioning and turning around. But recovery is important, but it's also equally important to recognize that it is still a loss, and it is something that the current leadership of the SABC, I have no doubt, is mindful of, and is working very hard towards making sure that things continue to get better and better.
While recovery is important, we know that several proposals to rework the SABC's funding model have been in the spotlight, yet the broadcaster and government have yet to decide how to proceed. Are you in support of reworking the SABC's funding model? And perhaps bring us in your confidence. How is your department strategizing the SABC's funding model? Is it a priority at this stage?
Well, the funding model of the SABC is always going to be a permanent question that exists, particularly given the financial challenges that the SABC faces, and also given the reality that the Treasury, which is the public purse and the main financial contributor towards the SABC's financial health, that its contribution is going to increasingly get smaller and smaller with competing interests. So the focus is going to be how do we create the space for the SABC to be able to generate revenue and not be solely reliant on government funding alone. And I think that is an ongoing conversation. I think one of the things that were proposed, in the SABC bill, which is now with the portfolio committee, was, to really look at this question of the funding model for the SABC, and that is an ongoing assignment that we have in terms of looking at ways of securing sustainable funding for the SABC, particularly given that it has this burdensome role of the public mandate that it has.
So are you in support of that?
I mean, that's what needs to be explored. Yeah. There is room and space for a public broadcaster to exist. So we gotta find the right funding model to support the public broadcaster.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, speaking to us this evening, Solly Malatsi.